writers, agents, and publishers, for the first time since the Gutenberg Press, find themselves lost in a maze of mystery as technology alters the shape of the publishing industry. Searching for Answers is a group of writers throwing pop culture, writing, and publishing into a crucible of clarity, passion, and humor. This group is the Write Pack. Welcome back to Write Pack Radio. This is your host and producer, David Allen Lucas. And with me today is...
Lee Savage, author of Erotic Paranormal, and under the name Carrie Lee Williams, children's books.
I'm Jennifer Stolzer, author, children's book author, and illustrator.
Brad R. Cook, author of the Iron Chronicles, which is a steampunk series. Do check it out. Iron Horseman and Iron Zulu are out, and if you're so inclined, drop by Main Street Books in St. Charles. You'll always find a signed copy there.
Hooray!
Fedora Amos, I write Victorian Whodunits. The new Jemima McBustle mystery is out. It's called Mayhem at Buffalo Bill's Wild West.
Hooray.
So the box arrived. It finally arrived. And it looks pretty good, too. I was, it's a hardcover, which is amazing to me.
Hardcover.
Oh, she's fancy.
She shoots, she scores.
And I got a good review from Historical Novels Review. It said it was a lively read. Oh, gosh.
Very nice.
Hey, congrats.
Big boys.
You can see Claire Applewhite and me at the Carondelet branch of the St. Louis City Library on April 9th.
Hey, far enough in advance.
11 o'clock.
Yes.
Right, I'm Melanie Colany, feels like not much, but author of nonfiction and diligently working on fiction.
Yes, and actually that's kind of why I didn't announce anything with me, because it's like I haven't felt like I've really done much. But right now I'm working on a audio play script, and I've kind of stupidly set a big goal for myself. Next year, I say this stupidly because, every time I set a goal, it just, life interferes. But
You have a lot of goals set currently.
I know, exactly.
In general.
But he's changing them. He's not,
This
Well,
goal,
he had a goal to make Write Pack Radio happen, and he made it happen.
He
meets his goals, too,
I do make them, usually. But my goal is by February of next year, I think that's the deadline, definitely be January, I plan to submit an audio play to the BBC World Audio Play Competition International.
Nice.
That'd be
So,
exciting.
don't expect to win, but at least submit.
Actually, I like those goals because you can, whether or not you achieve them is all up to you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And speaking of goals, or actually I should say rules, we are going to talk today about Neil Gaiman's. Gaiman's. God, I can't pronounce his name. I'm sorry. Neil, if you ever listen, forgive me.
He's British.
I know.
Not Japanese.
I know.
So it's Neil Gaiman, not Neil Gaiman.
Yes, this is true. That does help.
You probably like that
We're going to
answer.
He likes being British.
Anyway, we're going to talk about his 8 rules of writing for to launch our first episode of the 3rd season of Write Pack Radio. Thank you for hanging in with us.
Pat on the back.
I mean, this all started off as a crazy idea around a coffee house, at a coffee table, and now here we are 3 seasons into it. And please tell your friends about us. Keep sharing it. We love you guys. And do comment, please, on our Facebook.
Let us know you exist, other than just a number.
We know you exist. There are those who comment, but we want more. We would love to hear from you more. So, I'm going to start off with his first rule, and this is probably the best rule there is. Number 1 rule is...
It's very complex.
Ready? Sit down. Think about this hard. Right.
What?
One
Right.
word. Right. It's an important rule. It is the most important rule because if you don't sit down and write, then your book will never happen.
Yeah.
I think we need a write rep. And I'm an old white woman, so I'm not going to write one. But I think I'm going to write a right cheer, and I will get that to you next time, and we'll see if we can do a right cheer.
Right rap.
If you're a rapper out there, submit us a rap.
That's a thought too. The right rap, we love it. We'll try it.
Yeah.
You'll hear
seriously.
all of us white people.
It'll be a very unfortunate episode.
How many,
down.
Yeah.
how many viewers down would we lose?
That's seriously.
Or gain because of the humor of it?
Good point. That might be our biggest hit, yeah.
Oh.
It'll go viral.
Well, the rule is to write, not to rap. So thank
Yes.
goodness.
But his next rule, number 2, is put one word after another. Find the right word, put it down.
Which is another way of saying right.
Right.
Right. It's amazing how many of these are going to be right.
Yes.
I mean, let's be honest. You know, and Brad said it a little while ago, we've all kind of said it. How many of us have gone to conventions, workshops, conferences, you name it, and you walk and you run into somebody, walk into somebody who is, you've got 2 brand new newbies that are, let's say, staying side by side. One is, I am writing this, blah, blah, whatever it is, maybe not be anything you ever want to read, but nevertheless they're writing it. And the other one is, I want to write. I want to be a writer. I'm in love with, well, I'm translating. I am in love with the romance of writing. And I'm going to start writing. Okay, yay. But you haven't written yet. That's where literally where the nail hits the head. I mean, the hammer hits the nail. I was trying to avoid a different.
Where the rubber
cliche.
meets the
I
asphalt.
promise
That's what I was trying to avoid. But
We have not been drinking. Just to.
I swear this is a
I don't think
non-alcoholic drink I
anybody is
have.
going to suspect that we're drinking. We're all too square.
No, wait a
Hey,
minute.
I'm actually sitting here with a beer in front of me.
Yeah,
I'm
and
just not drinking it at the moment.
At the moment, that was a little gift from me to Brad for things he's done. But yeah, excuse me, I am known for the Blue Arrow, so you know.
Not the Green Arrow.
Not the
No.
Green Arrow.
That's
That's DC.
And I don't think I'm that square.
Well, you might be square, but it's a whole different kind. And on that note, Brad's been patiently
Yes.
waiting.
So I would actually say that whereas number 1 is probably the most important rule in writing, to write, 2 is the essence of exactly everything that we try and do as writers, because there are millions of words out there, and to find the right order for them, that is actually the toughest thing that we do. You know, we can sit there and create, but what we're all trying to do is find those perfect order for those words.
And recently, with re-going back through my book, I realized that I used the perfect word too many times. So be careful of repetition. And remember to change it up a little bit. But don't worry about it your first draft.
Yeah.
You have time to go back over it later and catch those things.
That's where rule number 1 comes in.
Ernest Hemingway's mantra was one true sentence. That's what every writer should strive for. One true sentence.
One
If
of the
we
things,
can do it, that'd be amazing and beautiful. Still trying to find that one true sentence.
Aren't
One-
we all?
another side to that, completely the other side of the coin. And thank you to somebody who I'm not going to name their name here, but thank you to somebody for pointing out that this non-existent word has somehow slipped into my spoken vocabulary. I catch it when I write it, but the word, quote, the non-word, irregardless, that does not exist, and I know it does not exist, but somehow it slipped out of my mouth at one of our last recordings.
Afraid it slipped
So
out
got more
other times.
other times? Okay, well, I finally got called out.
Yes.
How's that? Thank you. Love you too. Okay,
There
but
are all kinds of words like
Yeah.
that.
yeah, there are.
There's some politicians who've, put careers on that.
And seriously. And we are Americans. We like to create a word at a drop of a hat. Any hat.
That reminds me of something that actually came up when I was trying to write, unfortunately not the actual dialogue of the book or whatever. No, this was character notes. But the word was unscathed. I tried to spell it a bunch of times, and the computer just wasn't getting it, and I knew any of the choices were wrong, so I put it into Google. It turns out I'd spelled it phonetically. And my misspelling was so common that my misspelling was in the Urban Dictionary. And the Urban Dictionary's definition gave me the correct spelling of unscathed.
This is true.
So this is how
amazing.
words change over time.
They do change. Well, yeah, and talking about words changing over time, I was listening to a Cary Grant radio play. Cary Grant was in it, it wasn't written by him. And there was a word which we wouldn't use today that actually belongs in somebody's erotic fiction that had a completely different meaning, clearly back in the 1950s.
I'm gonna guess what this word is.
No, and I'm not going to mention it here at this one, but we can talk afterward.
And it's not the word. It's probably not the word you're thinking of.
We'll find that out later.
Let's just say there are a lot of words that have changed meaning.
Yes,
Yes.
they have.
Added meanings more than changed.
Good point, yes.
Sometimes they've actually. The original meaning has been lost. Let's just put it that way for some of
It's
them.
still there in some dictionary, though.
Well, yeah, in old dictionaries, yes, or
They're always important to
historical
consult.
descriptions.
So rule number 3 is...
Sure. Actually, this one's probably the most important for every writer.
Amen.
And that is to finish what you're writing. Whatever you have to do to finish it, finish it. I love people who have that beautiful idea in their head that they want to write. Everyone has it. We all have a novel in us. A writer is not the person who starts a novel. A writer is the person who finishes a novel. And the reason I say that is because I love people who start things. I've started numerous things that have not made it to the end. But there is nothing that you will feel greater in this world than hitting that last period. You'll see your book on the shelf. That's awesome. Yes, you're going to see your book listed in places. You're going to see it, and people will talk about it. All of those feelings are awesome. They all come after, though, that last period. So finish what you write.
There's a lot to be said for finishing something and then letting it sit and gel for a while and then coming back to it, so that even though it's finished, it will never be finished unless you are agreed that it is finished.
Or you run out of time.
That's
Yeah.
right. Or you can just keep on finishing and polishing forever and ever. But at some point in time, you have to call an end to it and do something else with it, such as submit it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's when it really is finished in my estimation. But certainly when you write the end, that's the first time it's
Yeah.
finished.
Yes.
Terry Pratchett, who died recently, but there was after his last published book, which he did write the entire thing, called The Shepherd's Crown. But there was a little description, basically, you kind of think of it as a eulogy at the end of it. And he was saying that very often they had to pry his books away from him because he came up with key scenes and wrote those first. And then he wrote all the connecting bits. And then he went back through and just kept improving it and kept improving it and kept improving it. And very often his editor would have to say, "It's good enough, let's go." So I don't remember who said, works are never finished, they're abandoned.
I think, well, if
Anyway,
not said by,
or-
if not said by, then definitely quoted by was George Lucas. He had said that.
Someone else said it too.
Yeah, I'm sure it's probably a quote.
And I just want to remind you, even if it's finished and it's out there, it doesn't mean at some point as you learn more that you can revisit, especially as an indie author, you can revisit it, repolish it again, and re-put it back out there for your readers. Because we all learn as we go.
One of my favorite sayings is that you can't edit a blank page, because it's true. For as much as you want to revise while you're writing, if there's nothing there, if there's nothing on the page, if you didn't start off with Rule 1, which is right, you have nothing to go back to. You have nothing to revise. You have nothing to finish. You have nothing to hand in. You have nothing to submit. So it doesn't matter what it takes to get through it, as he even says, whatever you have to do, finish it. It doesn't matter if it takes 20 years. It doesn't matter if it takes, every waking moment of your life for a chunk of time. That finishing it is what allows you to then go back and revise it, which is what then allows you to submit it. As writers, we take steps. Everything's a step, another step forward. And even when you think you're done and you've reached the peak, it turns out, no, that was just one mountain. There's a whole mountain range in front of you. And the first step is to finish what you were writing. Well, probably the first step is to start writing it. The second step is to finish it. But that is, I can't stress enough, getting it down on a page. If there's nothing there, you have nothing to work with.
And on the other side, too, is people around the table know, and I'm not going to go into the reasons, for the last several years, I've been tied up so much that, sadly, I had very few things I had finished. Before this whole time period, I had written and finished 12 novels. Didn't any of them get published? Two almost did, but they didn't, and I'm glad they didn't, especially looking back at them. But the other part is, through that whole entire period in which I was not finishing, I was starting, I wasn't finishing. Talk about me. I don't know about anyone else here. Yes, I'm an A-type personality. But talk about a super demotivator, a super depression. It's like, okay, I got 8 chapters done of this book, and now suddenly life just puked all over me like a cat with a bad hairball. And now, months and months and months later, here I come back, and I'm like, I don't even know where I was going with this. Irregardless if I plotted or
There you go. You did it again.
Holy cow! Is that in there?
It's a new drinking game. Every time David
Every
uses
time
a
I
word
say-
that doesn't exist, take a drink.
Take a drink.
It's just regardless.
And officially, yes, I know. Officially, I know it's regardless. I do know where this came from, but I don't believe how much it's.
Try saying irrespective. That'll work almost all the time.
Yes, it will. From here on, yes, please, somebody punch me, kick me, something. I am
It's
determined
gonna
to
get
get rid of this word.
catchy. It's gonna get catchy, and the rest of us are gonna start saying
Yeah, if we
it.
start using it, then it's a problem.
Yes, do not let this.
We're gonna make it a
Bad
new word.
word.
There we go.
Do not let this bad word corrupt you. Okay, I think Lee, then Brad.
Okay, I wanted to jump on something Brad said because I recently had this issue with the current project I was writing on. I had to turn off my editor because I started thinking too much about my point of view. I was switching back and forth in this love scene too much, and I had been told, don't do that, don't head hop too much. Well, I had to write it how it was flowing first. We'll worry about changing around the point of view afterwards. But sometimes you have to turn off your editor for a while so you can at least get it down.
That's
I
the point.
need
Finish.
to turn on my editor. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was going to say about unfinished projects that you've completed that won't ever see the light of day. Query Shark, which was a very famous blog that ran for some time and still exists. You can still find it out there. It was held by It was created by literary agent Janet Reed. But anyway, she had a thing of saying that in your query letter, you should never use the term, "this is my first novel." Because as she would always say, if this is your first novel, I don't want it. She wants you to have written something, to have put it aside, and then gone to something else and written that. Or moved on to another project. So the fact that you have, manuscripts in the drawer, to anyone out there who's got manuscripts that they've finished that they don't think are ever going to see the light of day. I mean, God, I know I have several.
Raise your hands if you
Yeah,
have
exactly.
them. All of us
Everyone's
do.
gonna raise their
Yeah.
hands. So, but the point is that, this is how we learn and grow as writers. And the fact that you were able to complete one project and then move on and complete another project, that shows that you have a more than just a passion for this industry, that you have a business sense about this industry, that you know exactly what it's going to take, because I think only Harper Lee has written one book
Right.
and been a famous author in recent memory. So the reality is that you're going to have to write more than one book. You're going to have to write several books. So knowing that, can make those ones that sit in the drawer and never see the light of day a little less stressful.
Agreed. And also, too, another way to look at it, as Brad was talking, let's change arts. Let's say you want to be a famous painter or a famous sketcher or
Sketcher.
somebody who does sketches.
Sketch. I think that's called an artist.
Just artist. Just a famous
I don't know if you can get a degree
I
as
was
a
trying to think-
sketcher.
I don't know if you can either.
Illustrator.
I invented it. I was trying to illustrator, whatever. And you've got talent. But think about the 5-year-old who just came home from school, gave mom or dad a picture they drew at school. They may have talent. But would that ever make it into an art museum?
Occasionally it does, but yeah, not generally.
Not generally. But they're
Not
learning the
a
I don't know, I'm
craft.
thinking you find Leonardo da Vinci's 5-year-old sketch.
Yeah.
That's probably making it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for different reasons.
That's not the point that's
No.
being made.
Yeah,
That's not the 5-year-old starting off. That's the dead guy for centuries going, this is great. This
Yeah,
is where it
oh
started.
dear. But no, what I'm trying to say is everything you write is a building block to improve your art.
What's the next rule?
Number 4. Fedora already touched on it, actually.
Yeah.
We did, yeah.
Heavily.
Yes. You want to say? I'll throw it out there.
Go
Put it
ahead.
aside. Read it pretending you've never read it before. Show it to friends whose opinion you respect and who like the kind of things that this is.
That's a good caveat.
Yes, very important.
Yes.
Well, I honestly don't think that it necessarily has to be someone that likes the kind of thing that this is. That's a help, of course, but I think they might give you more praise and less reality than somebody who is a good judge of writing in one fashion or another. So I think your critique groups and your critique partners might be of more than one type.
In the Writers Guild, we try and pair people up with people of similar interests, because having an interest in the genre encourages your critique partner to want to actually participate and read your thing. I've given my fantasy book to people that I respected, family members or whatever. I wrote this book, isn't it great? It's like I encourage, and they gave it back to me and said, I encourage your actions, but I have no interest in that.
Well,
Also, especially like when you're writing something like I write with erotica, you don't want someone who would be like all blushing and not into it. It doesn't matter if they themselves write erotica. I have some that write sweet romance or whatever, and they'll read mine and critique it, but they have to at least have an interest in reading it. Otherwise, they're going to just push it aside. They're not going to read through it.
So basically, I agree with exactly what Fedora's saying. However, there are different types of people that you want to read your book. So you can have anyone who understands writing read your book and break it down for you. Break down things like the story structure, the word choices that you use, your points of view, things of this nature. However, there are genre-specific things that happen within books, whereas somebody who writes adult fiction and writes an adult thriller spy novel is probably not the best person to judge certain aspects of my middle grade. Just because they're not going to understand how you write for kids. They're not going to understand the differences between genres. However, we're not to that stage yet here. I've written something that's cold, that's just come out it's just come out of my brain, and you can factor it out you can farm it out to different people. You can send it to some people who are going to break it down on a strictly writing structural level, and then you'll want people who read your genre to break it down.
Yep, I have no objection to getting advice from people outside your genre, but you have to know enough, if you're going to do that, to know when to ignore the advice. For instance, if Lee were to give you her book, and you were to read it, and to advise, the sex scenes are way too explicit, why do you have a sex scene here, why do you have a sex scene there? And the reasons is, there are actual conventions for her genre that if she didn't have those specific things, no one would ever publish it. So in that case, it might be, you could still take the advice, like, this didn't feel natural, you need to build it up differently, but your advice to get rid of the sex scene just won't fly in that genre.
I want to make a note as well that Neil Gaiman has published in all age groups.
Yes.
And he's probably experienced firsthand. I can't say I don't know the guy. I would love to.
Yeah.
You're invited to my birthday party if you have an opportunity, Mr. Gaiman. But he probably knows better now, having written a book written a graphic novel, and written middle grade, and written a YA, and written an adult book, who to give the book to get the best feedback. If he's giving his middle grade book to someone who traditionally reads a more literary adult fiction, then they're going to read it and they're going to say it's a very interesting story, but they're going to miss the subtleties of the tone of writing a middle grade, how young people talk and think, stuff that would be more beneficial to him if he'd given the book to someone who either reads middle grade or has middle schoolers that they're familiar with. They could say, it was a good story. I don't think that this character was quite behaving like a middle schooler in this scene. I don't feel like that's a leap of logic. It's too old for him, or something like that. Age group, even more than genre, I think it's important to find someone that reads in your writing.
Now, I will say, Neil's probably super lucky. He probably just hands his book off to Amanda Palmer, who's his wife, and she's awesome, and probably just goes, I love this, and I hate this, and then they changes it, and it's like a bestseller. I would imagine that's the way it goes for Neil.
Another thing, you have to realize who your audience is, and write for the people you want to enjoy your book. So, for instance, Artemis Fowl, I don't remember the author's name. I can see it in my head. But point is, somebody that should have known was just complaining about the love to technologies. Like, it's too complicated. Kids aren't going to get this. And the person telling him that was absolutely wrong. It was the adults that weren't getting that. The kids were following it perfectly. So the point is, it's not that you don't give it to people outside your genre. It's that you have to realize, especially if it's, are they getting it? Are they understanding the story? Are they enjoying it? Is the person giving you the advice the person that you want to be enjoying your story? You know.
Well, I would say that I think you need to be very careful about any professionals that you have read it and make sure that they are in the loop, so to speak, on the kind of thing that you write, because you're paying $1.50 a page for developmental editing.
Most definitely.
But
know your editors.
Yes.
The industry is often behind reality. You know, the industry was publishing these kids' books that were boring for so long until somebody finally got through some books that were more complicated and the kids loved them.
The person's called Dr. Seuss.
Yeah.
And I just want to give a little warning, because so many of us use beta readers and things like that. I've recently had some friends that got bit by their beta readers, by their books getting released, pirated early. So maybe look at having non-disclosure agreements signed ahead of time now instead of just word of, unless it's like someone you really, really trust.
Yeah, or only give it to people who you trust, which
But-
would probably be nice.
If it's an electronic copy, you might want to do that. If it's a hard copy,
Let's
less
say if
risky.
my grandma decides to pirate my novel,
Yeah.
we're going to have
Real trouble,
words.
yes.
My favorite one today is you slip in certain errors into the novel that only you know about. You keep a list of those errors, so then when you find the pirated copy, you know exactly who released it, and you sue the shit out of them.
It's the phone book approach.
Yes. And a sidebar, mailing a copy to yourself to prove that you have copyright does not work.
No,
Yeah,
but it's already
copyright
copyright.
anyway.
You don't need to do that.
Exactly. Second you put it down.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5. Remember, when people tell you something's wrong or doesn't work for them, they are almost always right. When they tell you exactly what they think is wrong and how to fix it, they are almost always wrong.
Interesting.
Great rule.
Very perceptive, I
Yes.
think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And that's because what is right in your book is good. That's,
Uh-huh.
a lot of people are probably going to find that. What's wrong is their own thing. Their
Well, no.
own thing about a book that they don't like.
Uh-huh.
And it's their own personal, internal
Brad,
thing.
I disagree with what you're saying. I don't think you're defining what the rule just said.
No, hold on.
Yeah.
What I mean is that when people give you criticism about a book, 9 times out of 10, it's their personal pet peeve
Yeah.
that they have an issue with. That doesn't necessarily mean that it is something that you need to follow, because their personal pet peeve may not be a good thing for your book.
While I agree with what you said in general, I don't think that's what the rule said. I think what the rule said is if someone reads something and says something's wrong, chances are they're correct and something is wrong.
Yes.
Now, when they say you need to do X to fix it, that advice X is almost always wrong.
Yes.
But that's not what you were saying.
No, what I'm saying is that's what I'm meaning is, when somebody's giving you advice, if they want to tell you that something is wrong in your book, fine. That's probably wrong. The point is that it's generally somebody's pet peeve. Don't always follow that.
Yeah.
So
Take
they
it with a
don't
grain
know
of
how
salt.
to fix it, especially in your work. They don't know how to
Yeah.
fix it.
Right.
I think it's the advice here is to make note of when people have a problem with something. But the solution that they present may not always be the proper solution. Don't just do what other people tell
I've
you
run
to
into so
do.
many people have problems with word choice or something
Yeah.
like that. That's their own pet peeve against that word. Just take moist out.
Oh, I thought you could continue. Sorry.
No, I'm fine.
Okay. I was
Just made
gonna
me
say-
think of a character's name that was Moist von Lipwig.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was supposed to be a terrible name.
Yeah, I was going to say probably one of the best pieces of criticism I get on anything I've ever written is, and this is what I use actually when I read other people's work, is something here just threw me out of the book. That's all I need to know. Something, wherever that was, that I'm looking at paragraphs before and paragraphs after, it's like, okay, what did I do?
That's
What's
actually
wrong?
beautiful advice.
Yeah.
I always try to look for where I'm starting to lose faith in the author voice.
Yes.
Because when I stop questioning what the characters are doing and start questioning what the author is doing, I'm obviously no longer in the world.
Right.
I think too that a lot of times we have to put in stuff that will make things understandable later, and a person who simply reads it is going to say, well, it kind of slows down here. You know, I think it ought to go faster. And yeah, well, I may think it ought to go faster too, but I can't make it go faster because I have to have the plot points and the red herrings in this early in the book.
I just find too often that what we run into with either bad critique partners, bad editors, bad beta readers, or whatever, is people who want to rewrite your novel.
Yeah.
I've
And
heard that's an agent problem especially.
Yeah, that's, you know, you'll find it everywhere because we all have these opinions that, you know, we think we can make it better. And the reality is that it's better to flag something that's wrong and let the author change it than it is to rewrite it and screw it up.
I have a story. We were fortunate enough in St. Louis to be visited at Webster University by the directors of the upcoming Disney movie Zootopia. They spoke at Webster on last Friday. So the 26th. And I sat in on it because I'm an alumni and it's nice. And they said something that I really appreciated. I took notes on it. I don't have them open. But they said that when directing animation and actors, you're tempted to say, no, do it like I do it. But even though you enter with an idea exactly of how you want this thing to happen, you don't want to rob that artist of the contribution that they were bringing to the work. And the work together, as everyone cooperates, is what gives it life and flavor and depth and facets. So if you want to make it all by yourself, make it all by yourself. But when you're inviting other people to contribute, you have to acknowledge that they're bringing a different perspective, and perhaps that perspective is worth considering. You know, don't automatically squash it just because it's not what you had in mind.
Tying in directly, you have hit. What they gave you was one of the biggest pieces of advice I've ever run into with script writing. Script writing is a lot different than writing a novel. So I've done both. It's very clear. But in script writing, you give parentheses details of what that person's going to do. Close parentheses, that's for audio. Movies got a little something similar. And that limits the actor so much. You might see it something like that, but if you are constantly just putting out directional script to this actor, they're nothing but a robot, and that's boring as hell to watch.
Yeah.
And you'll never sell it because it's going to be too many words. It's not going to be 120 pages.
No one's going to want to make it
That's
either.
right.
And tying into that too, that's where it's good to find someone that clicks well with you and can adapt to your writing style, and maybe say, okay, this does need fixed here. Here's what I would suggest, and it flows with your type of style, and then you can go back and tweak it too. But it's good to find someone that can flow with your style.
Well, hear anyone's ideas. You know, it's the rule isn't saying never let anyone give you an idea of how to progress forward. The point is that their idea is not necessarily the only way you can go. Almost always wrong doesn't mean always wrong. If you have someone who's very good at plot structure and says, you know, I think you really need a calm beat here, maybe you should have them stop for a rest, and you go, you know what, I think that's a good idea, and you go ahead and let them stop for a rest, you haven't done it wrong just because you took someone's advice for a specific action in your book. They're coming from an informed opinion, and perhaps they're right. Now, if you know that they're going to rest in the next chapter, then obviously they don't need to stop and rest now. They're going to stop and rest the next chapter. We're just going to let them get a little bit more exhausted. It's fine. Thank you for your input. It'll be in a future chapter. But it's, you know, they're voicing an opinion that they think the pace is moving too fast. And that's what you get from that feedback. The pace is moving a little fast right now. Not specifically you need to rest right now or else the book is terrible. Just I'm feeling the pacing is too fast. And you can internalize that advice without obeying it as if it's a law.
Number 6. I think that way Jen ended number 5 feeds us right to number 6. Fix it. Remember that sooner or later, before it ever reaches perfection, you will have to let it go and move on and start to write the next thing. Perfection is like chasing the horizon. Keep moving. And I'm going to say, I've talked about this in a previous podcast. It's a military term called polishing the cannonball. You're trying to get aim just perfect. Oh, one more centimeter to the left. No, another centimeter back to the right. Nothing is ever going to be perfect.
Just hit the side of the
Just
ship.
Right. Just hit the side of the ship and be done. Or in this case, submit.
Yeah, actually, so I love this rule. And the reason I love it is 2 reasons. First off, perfection is unattainable. You will drive yourself mad trying to make your book perfect. And I don't know if it's possible. I'm sure there's a perfect book out there somewhere. But I do not read them all the time.
It's probably too long.
Yeah, exactly. But the point also is that it is important to fix things. When things come up, fix it. You know, if there's a scene that 3 people have said, I don't like the way this works, and you have 3 different opinions on how to fix it, don't just leave it the way it is. You know, the point is not to just leave it the way it is. People had an issue with that. Now, it depends if you want to take, as Jen was saying, you can take some informed advice, but the reality is, you're the guy who has to sit down, and you're the guy who has to rewrite that scene because you know there's something not right there. And then you move on. And when you've done that through a book, that's called revising. When you've revised your book, then it's time to submit it. Maybe you revise it again. I'm actually not the biggest, so George R. R. Martin is famous for this. He will write his book, and then he will revise and revise and revise and revise and revise and revise and revise. And it's one of the reasons why he takes so long to write books. I prefer to go through it a few times and then turn it over to somebody else and let them go through it. Because I think at some point, and this is a phrase I love to use, you can no longer see the trees from the forest. All these words in front of you are blended together in such a mush that you can no longer see what's good and bad about it. But somebody else is going to come through and flag what's good and bad about it without any problems.
You definitely need to fix it. And what I'm about to say is not counter that at all. But if you spend so much time, George R. R. Martin, how many fans of his are complaining that the next book's not out?
That's not entirely the revision's fault, though.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm not saying it is.
That's a con fault, because he was traveling too much last year.
I understand. But what I'm trying to say is, if all you do is spend time, I'm going to use the term again, polish that cannonball, then A, your work may never see the light of day. B, if it's part of something which you've got fans built up, they want to read your work, and you're laying them down. And C, how many stories are you killing that will never see the light of day because you're so focused on the one book?
I want to say something about the joy of fixing things. When somebody else tells you that, this doesn't seem quite right, or when you notice this, who wrote that? That's crap. I must have been drunk when I wrote that. And if you can fix it, that's one of the great satisfactions that I find in writing, and I think it's true for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. I'm a firm believer that the magic is not in the first draft.
Never
the
is.
Magic is in the editing. The magic is in revising. I mean, the reason we edit these books, the reason we give them to editors, the reason we give them to publishers, the reason why everybody puts their 2 cents into these is to make them the best possible book that it can be. That's what you really want. When you sat down and wrote it, you were in a certain mindset, you stopped at certain places, you did all this kind of stuff. The reader's going to come in much, much later down the road, and they're going to interpret everything a different way. But the point is that the real magic of writing, what English teachers love, what English teachers have been flagging for generations and stuff like that, I really don't think is the guy sitting at the computer or the lady typing it out the perfect sentence. Hemingway's one true perfect sentence probably did not come out of his head as that beautiful sentence, but probably got revised a bunch and whittled down and then expanded and changed and this word substituted for this word until it is the one true perfect sentence.
Most certainly. I said before, what I said, that's not negating that.
I
you need to revise. There's a lot of junk I've written. Believe me, they needed to be revisioned.
However, I also agree with the second half of this, which is put it down and move on to something new.
Right, exactly.
You know, because at some time we love our babies, you know, and for me sometimes it's hard to go back and look at the finished, polished, on-the-shelf book because there's errors in there. And the reader probably doesn't see them all, but I do. And, I open it up and I'm like, oh, no. Or something like that. But the point is that at some point you just have to set it down and move on to the next project.
Okay. Number 7. You want to take that one or you
Sure.
else?
Laugh at your own jokes. It's simple, easy, concise. And I actually love this one because it's true. You need that sense of humor about your own stuff.
I would add, cry when that works too.
Yes.
Most
As
certainly.
Robert Frost said, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader. So emotion, whether good, bad, whatever, have it, feel it.
And if you're not laughing at something that you write, what fun are you having? If you're not crying at something you've written, why did you write it?
Assuming that was your intention.
Assuming that was your intention. Yes.
Yes, if
for
you're
a
crying
caveat.
at the jokes, that's not a good
I'm going for a completely different emotion in my book.
Yeah,
so.
I looked at you for a second like, I'm not saying
Yes,
that
but
one.
if you're crying during your sex scene or laughing your way through it, that might not be the best thing either.
Right.
I mean, I just wrote a scene, oh God, that probably went on for 3 pages of script. That really was snark meets snark, back to snark, like a ping pong game. And I don't know how much of that's going to get edited out. There's going to be parts that will. But yeah, it was still on target with what the scene was going to do.
Usually
It was
you're
just
good to
hilarious.
remove one exchange, likely at the end.
Most likely. Most likely. Anyway, Melanie will tell you, she was sitting there afterwards. When I was finally done, I almost busted out laughing. I say almost because I was in a place where you really are not supposed to make that much sound. Similar to a library. So I was busting up very quietly. She gave me a weird look.
But I think it's also not to take yourself too seriously.
Exactly.
We all want to think we're awesome writers, and we all, want to know this, but on some level you have to understand that you're just doing the same thing that all these other people are doing, and you're not the first person to ever think of that joke. So at some level, I also think that this rule is an understanding that we are not gods, even though we are the gods of our own universes and we like to play God a lot. The reality is that we are, writers.
Exactly. We had this as one of the rules, or a statement, a quote from some author on a recent podcast, and for the life of me, I can't think who it was, but they were saying, you wrote a book. You didn't do brain surgery.
That was...
M.R. Sellers.
Yeah.
Thank you. I knew somebody...
It was. We just had that. It was not...
It was a guess.
Last Sunday, it aired.
It was
It was a
the...
God among men.
It was the podcast, if you want to
He would
catch it.
tell you
Actually, this
so.
was a great podcast about authors behaving badly. Author etiquette.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. As soon as you said, it's like, yes. I could hear the voice. I just couldn't... Ugh. Okay. Be also willing to laugh at your own mistakes, too, people. Like, when I say irregardless, I'm sitting here going, I am kicking myself in the pants. I know where it came from. I got to get it out of me. Number 8. And number 8 is... Do you want to take it or you want me? Okay.
The main rule of writing is that if you do it with enough assurance and confidence, you're allowed to do whatever you like. That may not be the rule for life, as well as for writing, but it's definitely true for... Oh, as well for writing. But it is definitely true for writing. You just messed my brain up there.
Yeah, let me try that again. That may be a rule for life as well as for writing, but it's definitely true for writing.
Yes. So write your story as it needs to be written. Write it honestly, and tell it as best you can.
And I think that last phrase, it says a lot. Tell it as best you can. Back to the polishing of the animal. Nothing ever written is perfect. Never will be. You just be the best that you can do.
That quote that rule makes me think both of Douglas Adams and Neil Gaiman himself, because they're both doing things in books that most editors and publishers say, you can't do that.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works, I would also say with the assurance and confidence, you need to add consistency. Because if you're consistent, that's fine. You know, if you want to do something, if you want to use irregardless in your books, you can. So long as you use it every time it should come up and not just once or twice. Once or twice, people are going to think it's a mistake. But if your character's saying it every couple of chapters, bam, now it's a character trait.
Exactly.
Now it's a quirk that we love about this person. And you know what? You're going to have on the T-shirt, it's going to say the title of your book, and underneath it's going to say irregardless.
Exactly.
You know, so it's, you know, it is, I would say that, you know, have confidence to do what you think you should do, and then be consistent with it. And that level of, you know, those two things combined is, you know, going to make it to the point where it moves out of being something you shouldn't have done into capturing kind of the essence of what you were doing.
That reminds me of, what was her, Ancillary Sword, or,
Anne Leckie.
Anne Leckie is like, there's every character in her book, no matter what their gender or sex is referred to as she.
Yep.
With the by the narrator, who is a first-person book, so it's the main character. So.
We Americans love confidence and self-assurance.
Sure.
All you have to do is look at Lady Gaga, Donald Trump.
Yep.
Donald Trump's a great example.
Exactly.
He never met a man more confident in his own superiority.
Exactly. And look how far it gets them. I think the same thing really is true of writers, whether it's the one that you just suggested, or Douglas Adams, another one who is very different and very self-confident in what he
was
does.
consistently inconsistent.
Right,
Yes.
right. And it can make a very big splash, bigger than most. But whether you're that kind of confident or not, if you're confident in your writing and what you can say, because you have stories that nobody else in the world can tell. And if you say them with confidence, they're going to get out there.
Amen to that.
That also probably goes for your sentence structure. Be confident in your sentence structure. Yeah, and you'll write a much better sentence. If you're writing wishy-washy sentences, that's not a good book.
No, that puts you to sleep.
Exactly. So be confident even in your sentence structure.
A perfect example, I'm not going to name the book. I don't know if I talked about this on the recording or not. I know I've talked about it with others. I can still remember a book that I read in 8th grade. That literally every paragraph, which I think was wishy-washy writing,
This
put
was a
me to
bestseller
sleep.
by the Mummy.
Yeah, it was a bestseller. Sure heck wouldn't have made it past me. I would literally read a paragraph and fall asleep.
Sounds like a very long book.
It really should not have been. Okay, and on that note,
Well, I will say real quick.
Go ahead.
We've gone through the 8 rules. If you want to find the 8 rules, you can. There are multiple graphics out there that lay out the 8 rules. I've had them for years. Anyone who's listened to multiple of these knows that I'm a huge fan of author rules. So I've got Vonnegut's and, different people's, Gaiman's beer. Yeah, Gaiman. That's right.
Gaiman.
Being one of them. But, so you can find these rules out there. There are blog posts about them. And if you have enjoyed Neil's rules and you don't know who Neil is, which I'm shocked, definitely check out his stuff. I'd start with the Sandman stuff, which are some awesome graphic novels, and then move into
I wouldn't
his
start
awesome
there.
novels.
I'd start with some novels. American Gods seemed like a good place to start.
That's a really good book to start with.
Yeah.
I'm a huge
'Cause
Sandman fan, though.
He writes in so many different genres. Pick the genre you like, and then find the Neil Gaiman book in that genre.
My first Neil Gaiman book was Neverwhere. It was pretty good.
Good one, yes.
I like the Boneyard book if you're looking for a kid's book. No, Graveyard
Graveyard.
book.
there was he gives a lot of advice on, and you can find this advice on YouTube, in his 2012 commencement speech. And there's a couple of ones which I'm going to quote real fast if I can remember. It's not ones we've covered here. Number 1 is make good art. And I might be quoting him on some of this. I might go, in fact, I'm probably going to go off on tangents with versions of it. But an alligator eats your leg off. Make good art. Your spouse runs away with an IRS tax agent. Make good art. Whatever you do, make good art. I know the IRS, he did something similar to the IRS. But the other one is there's 3 rules or 3 critical things you need to do on being a writer. One was, I'm thinking if anybody else remembers his speech. Be on time, be pleasant, and now my mind went blank. I was hoping somebody else could remember the third one. Anyway, but basically he says you don't have to even meet all three of them, just 2 out of 3. If you're pleasant...
Well, good. Just hit those 2 that we could remember.
Yeah.
I think a lot of authors need to remember about the being pleasant.
Yes. But I would suggest definitely look him up. There's also one thing he talks about in his commencement speech, so yes, I'm giving away spoilers. But he said there was one piece of advice that was given to him by Stephen King that he failed to pay attention to. Enjoy the moment. Enjoy what you're doing. He was so focused on getting out the next story, he missed the whole entire fun of being at book signings. Having fun of having that work out there. Enjoy what you're doing. If you're doing it just to make money, A, hopefully by now you figured out that's not likely to happen. Not saying it won't. There are exceptions to every rule, but B, if you are writing because you got tired of sitting in an office not feeling like you're being productive, what are you doing if you're doing it for not enjoyment reasons?
I've decided I'm on the waiting for 20 years in obscurity and then getting my HBO deal.
There you go. Or the HBO, whatever's
Yes.
out there at HBO.
That might be the next Netflix deal by then.
I'll take it.
Yes.
It takes a long time for some of us to get discovered. What did you
Exactly.
say?
Overnight, it took 10 years to make an overnight success.
But if you're going to get
That's what a lot of
discovered in
people-
10 years, you better start making your stuff now, because if there's nothing to be discovered in 10 years, when opportunity knocks, they're going to be like, who's that? We're going to keep going.
Yes, that's
So
been
I
clapping
think
for
basically that brings us back to rule number 1, which is
Right.
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 Uh-huh.
Right.
And by the way, I'm going to say this out there. I
What did
don't
you
even...
know?
I'm trying to do this with a straight face. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's fine,
But everybody, there's lots of books out there. There's lots of articles out there. There's lots of rules out there. Do this and you too can be a published author. Okay. Understand this. We're all walking up to the top of our mountain, wherever our mountain is. The mountain being our goal. And as Brad said earlier, there's always another mountain past it. But there is no 2 paths that are identical. When somebody says this is how they made it to the top, yes, that's how they made it to the top. There's only one thing that they all have in consistency, and that is putting themselves out there. If you're not putting yourself out there, you'll never be discovered. I'm sorry, walking around with your hands in your pockets and not talking to people at a conference, it's not going to cost somebody to come up to you and go, so tell me about the book you're writing. Unless they're trying to
No,
break
but that
ice.
will happen sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's trying to break ice rather than really interesting. So,
But don't expect it to happen.
No.
any other comments before we wrap up this?
Well, we're talking about journeys. I'll throw one more out there because I just read it on a blog post the other day.
Uh-huh.
So apparently now there's a thing where you can pay a couple of $1,000s and they'll guarantee that you are, 1, your book will get published. 2, you'll be a best-selling author. And it's a guarantee, and I love these guarantees because it's written in stone. It's a guarantee. I would throw it out that please do not do this. And if you want, Jane Freeman just had a huge blog about it. It's all about the Amazon bestsellers list. It's a wonderful, wonderful article.
Wow.
Check it out.
It's actually surprising. You have to sell surprisingly good few books to get on that list in some circumstances.
Yeah, in the blog
It's a time
article, they
period.
sold 3.
Yeah.
3
Wow.
3 books.
Do they get on the bestseller list?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've sold way more than that.
But it has to be the right time. That's
No,
okay.
well, it's time, but it's also the right list.
there are all these
Yeah.
sub-lists.
You're the Amazon bestseller list for Toaster Romance.
Exactly. Something along those lines. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Highly recommend the blog. Good blog post.
And since you talked about
Might be
it,
useful to read.
beware of anybody who has 2 things. One, that they guarantee you or have a magic way of doing this to reach the top. And number 2, beware of anybody who's asking you for money.
Yeah. A legit place is going to take royalties, not up front.
In fact, I'm going to talk.
Unless you're hiring me. I'm legit, but I'm a service.
Yes.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah,
Services are different.
yeah.
Yeah,
Services
different.
are different.
And if you don't understand, figure out what that is before you go further.
Like hiring a PA, a personal assistant, is a service. That is different.
Yes.
Unless you have someone that's a mega fan that wants to volunteer. And if I have a mega fan out there that's interested in being a PA, contact me.
Yeah,
on
no kidding.
Facebook.
If I have a mega fan out there, I would love to know. In fact, if you're a mega fan, I'd just like to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us
If you've
know.
heard of me before, please let me know.
So this is going a little bit way off, but staying on.
Oh, it's sweet.
I know we've gone so
Whatever.
way off anyway.
We got the rules done.
We did. So I'm
Check
gonna make another suggestion of a book to read.
Number 9.
So number 9, David's rule. No,
Read a book.
yeah, always read a book, but no. Since Brad brought up the whole thing about services that are out there that are really, they're trying to scam you. I'm going to suggest, if you've never read him, read an author by the name of Robert Greene. Robert Greene has been compared to be the modern Machiavelli. And one of his books, The Art of Seduction, may sound like something that Lee here has written, but in all honesty, actually it is the way to seduce people into cons, into political decisions, you name it.
Timeshare.
Timeshares. And if you ever been conned, if you ever want a good feeling about knowing that you're not a complete and total fool, he actually uses a true story that Al Capone was actually conned out of some money, and he was very happy to give it away. So I suggest reading that book. And with that, I am going to say have a great week writing, and tune in next week for yet another interesting subject in the writing industry. The new theme songs for Right Pack Radio were written and performed by Meredith Tate. All copyrights remain with her. Right Pack Radio would like to thank STL Books for allowing us to record in their office. STL Books is a online bookstore specializing in new and used high-quality literature, children's books, and books written by or about St. Louis. Please visit them online at www.stlbooks.com or find their store on the Amazon.com website.